They were leaving a wedding party, their own party, still laughing, heading to their first night together as husband and wife. But in just a few seconds, a headlight appeared in the darkness, the sound of a speeding engine, and then impact. When the police arrived, it was already too late. The bride, still in her dream dress, was lifeless, and the groom was between life and death. And one question remained: how did a perfect night end at the scene of a crime that shocked the United States? I'm Marcos Campos, and today's case is about Samantha Hudson. And that question I just asked, I'll present all the elements of the case. In the end, we'll try to understand this atrocity. If you enjoy detailed real cases, subscribe to the channel and follow me. You can also become a member, or just leave a like or comment, even an emoji. Agreed, announcements made, let's get to the facts. Samantha Miller was born in South Carolina on March 27, 1989. People who knew her described Samantha as an extremely loving, spontaneous, cheerful, sociable person, the kind of person who makes friends easily, always ready to chat, to help, someone full of energy. She loved animals, loved the sea, and according to her friends, one thing was very clear: Samantha simply loved life. We don't have much information about her life. Childhood, youth, biography. It wasn't explored much, but we know that as an adult, Samantha was in a relationship that seemed perfect with a guy named Eric Hutchinson. The two got along very well. They were very close, very much in love. Until at a certain point, Eric decided to take the next step, and he proposed to Samantha. And then began that wonderful phase she had always dreamed of, all the preparations for the big day. Samantha got involved in absolutely everything about her wedding. Every detail, everything she loved in her life was coming together there on her big day. The wedding was on April 28, 2023. It was a Friday, that's right, at Folly Beach in South Carolina, which was her favorite place. After the seaside ceremony, the guests went to a party hall facing the ocean. The atmosphere was pure happiness. Eric and Samantha were beaming, emotionally moved, living exactly the day they had always imagined. In one of the most memorable moments of that night, Samantha paid tribute to her mother and danced with her. The weather, sea breeze, music, and smiles made everything perfect. At a certain moment, she even mentioned that it was the happiest day of her life and that she truly wished from the bottom of her heart that the night would never end. She told me she didn't want it to end. From that moment on, she was officially called Samantha Miller Hutchinson. But this whole fairy tale, the perfect night, unfortunately, wasn't going to have a happy ending, the night that didn't end. For the end of the party, the bride and groom had hired a golf cart that would take them from the hall where the party was happening. From there to the hotel room, the suite where the bride and groom would spend their first night as husband and wife, on their wedding night, celebrating their honeymoon. A little after 9 at night, Eric's brother-in-law Benjamin went to get the couple's golf cart. In that cart were him, his 17-year-old son Brogan in the front seat, and the back reserved for the bride and groom. What no one could have imagined is that just a few seconds after they started that ride, a car speeding by would appear and violently hit the golf cart. The crash was so intense that the vehicle was thrown and destroyed. Police and rescue teams responded. The paramedics arrived quickly at the scene, but it was already too late. Samantha Hutchinson did not survive the impact. She died instantly at 34 years old, still wearing her dream wedding dress, on the very day that was supposed to mark the beginning of her new life. Eric was the most seriously injured in the accident after the collision. Benjamin and Brogan, though shocked and hurt, did not have major wounds. Brogan's injuries were so severe that he was the first released from the hospital. Benjamin had severe burns and needed very complex care, but nothing that posed a risk to his life. Despite this, he had reconstructive surgeries, skin grafts, and a lengthy recovery due to the severity of his injuries. In a way, but the situation, although not the most delicate, was the same as Eric's. He had multiple fractures in his face and skull, suffered internal bleeding, a brain hemorrhage, broke both legs, and injured vertebrae in his spine. He underwent several surgeries and spent a long time between life and death when he finally began to regain consciousness. The doctors and his family had to face that difficult moment. They had to tell him that Samantha had died in the accident. In response, Nettie Hutchinson, Eric's mother, launched a campaign on GoFound.me, an online crowdfunding platform. So it's a fundraiser to help the family cover the costs of Samantha's funeral and also the treatment of the injured. In that accident, there was massive mobilization and significant attention. About $365,000 was raised. Part of that amount was also used to organize a ceremony in honor of Samantha, exactly on the same beach where she had gotten married, exactly on the same beach. Weakened, just out of the hospital and using a wheelchair, Eric made a point of being present at this ceremony. The tribute took place on May 13, 2023. At the location, white and red flowers were distributed. People sang, talked about the joy for life that Samantha had, and celebrated her life. A wall near the site of the accident was painted with a landscape and also the phrase, "Sam plus Eric forever." During the ceremony, Eric, who was very emotional, said something that touched Iria deeply. She was a beach girl, very much a beach girl. "We used to walk here almost every morning, and this is her farewell. She's up there. She's definitely smiling." During the long aftermath, Eric gave an interview and he spoke for the first time about everything he experienced that night and also about how he was learning to live with Samantha's absence. He said that at that moment, everyone was extremely happy, living the peak of a perfect day. He revealed something that marked his memory even more. The last words he heard from Samantha were exactly when she said she wished that night would never end. After all, guys, they were deeply in love. It was an intense relationship and everything was going just as they had planned. It really was a fairy tale, wasn't it? While Eric was trying to recover physically and emotionally, another reality began to set in for both families. What had happened that night was not seen just as a misfortune, a tragic accident, but as a possible crime. The person who was driving the car that hit the golf cart was a young woman, 25 years old, named Jamie Lee Komarowski. She was behind the wheel of a rented vehicle, and according to the investigation, she had gotten drunk, consumed a lot of alcohol before driving. The police officers who arrived at the scene reported that Jamie showed clear signs of intoxication, a strong smell of alcohol, and also difficulty keeping her balance. They say she nearly fell a few times while giving her statement, but she insisted she was fine. She claimed that she had only had one beer and a shot of tequila and tried to treat the whole thing as a misfortune. But the evidence didn't match her version. Besides, she was driving over the speed limit. Jamie refused to take any of the tests the police were asking for. Another immediate test that could prove her blood alcohol level. For that reason, she was taken to a police department. There, the officers discovered that she already had a history of driving drunk, under the influence of alcohol. Despite the violence of the collision and the damage to the car, she was practically unharmed. Nothing happened to her. Given the seriousness of the case and her history, the court then decided that she should remain in custody and authorized toxicology tests to be carried out. And the result confirmed what the officers were already suspecting. Her blood alcohol concentration was about 3 times above the limit allowed by American law. In other words, the story about just a beer and a shot of tequila was nonsense. When she was informed that she would remain in custody, she became desperate. She started screaming, saying that it was unfair, and kept repeating that it had just been an accident. During the crisis, she began banging her head against the walls of her holding place. There, afraid that she might seriously hurt herself or even, who knows, later on, try to take her own life. The authorities moved the woman to a medical observation ward under constant surveillance at Charleston County Jail. We need to know more details about who this woman is. Who is Jamie Lee Komarowski? She was born on September 15, 1997 in Clinton, New Jersey, as the middle child with an older sister and younger brother. As a teenager, she attended North Hunterdon High School and excelled in sports. Her first job was as an assistant at a daycare called Right and Home. She worked there as a kind of classroom helper, She held that position for about a year until September 2014. After graduating from high school in 2015, Jamie moved to Conway, South Carolina to study hotel, resort, and tourism management at Coastal Carolina University. During that time, she did a bit of everything to support herself, She also worked as a waitress for about a year, and in her last year of college, she got an internship at Consensus Real Estate. After finishing her degree, she went through a few part-time jobs until she landed a permanent position as an account executive in the logistics department at Total Quality Logistics in Charleston. In her statement, and also through what she posted on social media, Jamie said that she was really dealing with depression and started using alcohol as a way of trying to manage these emotional conflicts, which was likely clear in her posts, right? Almost all of them involved things like parties, drinks, especially that tequila. In one of them, she even appears dressed as Buzz Lightyear at a Halloween party, making a joke and a clear reference to alcohol consumption. And so, guys, we can see how the links in this tragedy were being built, right? The fact that she got drunk, drank, that's her problem. The problem is when someone loses judgment and acts irresponsibly, leading to a tragedy like this, especially involving someone innocent. The investigation showed that on the night of the crime, Jamie had been to at least 4 different bars. Check this out. In every one, she only had drinks. During her first 23 days in custody, she reportedly made 271 calls but completed only about 128. A television station somehow got those recordings and published them, reportedly including conversations with family and lawyer friends. Jamie kept repeating all the time that she couldn't believe what she had done, what had happened. She claimed it was just an accident and insisted she was a good person. At several moments, she even seemed to downplay the seriousness of what she had caused, treating the situation more as something that would disrupt or ruin her own life. Kind of ignoring or sidelining any connection with the victims' families, right? I still don't know what's going to happen to me. She even mentioned that since she would be in prison for a few months, she intended to use that time to study, learn languages, and gain knowledge. Saying that when she got out of jail, she would be much smarter in her mind, she thought she would only stay there for a short time, right? Inside prison, her main complaints were pretty trivial, you know? Almost surreal, I would say. She complained about not being able to use the television remote and said the food was terrible. In one of the calls, she complained that she was forced to eat hot dogs, cold meatballs, foods that, according to her, she didn't like very much. Jamie's father tried to warn her about the content of those conversations, reminding her that the case was being widely covered by the media. Everyone was watching, and the calls were recorded. If anyone had contact, it didn't happen the way it was claimed. But, according to reports, she was much more concerned about her own butt, her image, and how people looked at her than about being considered a bad person. Even with those food daydreams and everything else, right? In the released recordings, she never showed real remorse for Samantha's death or the harm caused to the other victims. Another detail that caught attention in this case was the fact that although she was only entitled to phone calls since she was initially held without bail, Jamie ended up receiving visits from family members. Nothing else was formally reported about this. She was charged with driving under the influence, which stands for driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs in the United States. It's wild to drive like that, right? In addition, she was charged for causing serious injuries to 3 people and also for reckless homicide for the death of Samantha. Osiafanik was killed. In the initial phase of the process, Jamie Lee's family hired 2 very renowned lawyers, well known in the region, to defend her. The first hearing took place in August 2023, and its main goal was to discuss the possibility of bail. Jamie didn't even attend in person. The lawyers claimed that she suffered from psychological disorders resulting from severe depression. She admitted to alcohol issues and had psychological counseling but stopped treatment. The defense attempted to negotiate a deal. If bail were granted, Jamie would be under the direct responsibility of her family, would undergo monitoring by mental health professionals, and would be prohibited from consuming any type of alcoholic beverage or substance. Even so, the judge understood that the seriousness of the case did not allow for this kind of concession, and he ordered that she remain in custody. There's an interesting detail here, though not directly related to the daughter's crime. Years before, Jamie's mother was involved in a fatal accident. Look, but in that accident, in that situation, it was proven that she was not at fault at all. Because when she was driving through an area she used to drive in, there was a big fire and a lot of thick smoke started to cover the road. When she drove through, smoke entered her car, reducing visibility, and she hit a traffic officer who died. Later, since everything was considered a tragedy, she didn't face criminal charges. But going back now to her daughter's case, Jamie, The lawyers also requested that the court restrict the press's access to the case files and the recordings of the calls she made in prison. The request was granted. From then on, the media outlets could continue reporting on the case, but without releasing detailed content from those audios and documents. Alongside the criminal case, Eric filed a civil lawsuit against Jamie Lee and the bars she visited that night. Look at Drown Shop Lounge. Establishments that sell something can be held liable when they keep serving someone who is visibly intoxicated, because what happens? People kind of take on the risk of putting others in danger by continuing to get that person drunk, which is exactly what happened that night, that early morning. Eric Hutchinson about this civil lawsuit. He accepted a proposed settlement. There was a whole process, but basically he accepted a settlement of about $160,000. As the months went by, the case progressed and started to gain even more attention across the country. In December 2024, after the prosecution gathered all evidence, including toxicology reports, images, speed analyses, and past alcohol consumption testimonies. Also that night, Jamie Lee Komarowski decided to formally plead guilty. She admitted before the court to the charges of driving under the influence of alcohol, causing serious injuries to 3 people, and recklessly causing the death of Samantha. The hearing that sealed this outcome was marked by strong emotion. Family members of Samantha, Eric, and other victims were present, and many gave statements about the irreversible impact that her choice to drive drunk had on their lives. In the final phase of the trial, also held in December 2024, the judge made it clear that this was not just another traffic case, but rather an avoidable tragedy, a direct result of a conscious decision: drinking, going from bar to bar, and still choosing to get behind the wheel. Given this, the South Carolina court gave Jamie Lee Komarowski the maximum sentence for this crime, 25 years in prison. The sentence included charges of driving under the influence of alcohol, reckless homicide, and serious bodily injury caused to the other victims of the accident. With the conviction, the court ended the criminal phase. It was made clear that the death of Samantha, which happened just a few hours after her wedding, was not treated as a mere accident. An accident, as the perpetrator intended, resulted directly from highly irresponsible behavior that took a life, destroyed a family, and left a lasting mark on all involved. Did Samantha's mother sum up well what this case was? We're not going to get our lives back in 20 or 25 years. This is for a lifetime. Making, of course, a reference to the prison time the perpetrator is supposedly going to serve. Isn't this, after all, a completely avoidable case? A regrettable tragedy that explodes onto our screens. Here, the basic cliche that everyone with a bit of conscience and civility should know. Right, man, if you drink, dude, don't drive, okay? Don't think you're some tough guy like, I'm fine, man. It affects your reflexes, there's no way around it. If you're with someone, let the person who didn't drink drive. Otherwise, I don't know, call an Uber. If you know you're going out to get drunk, don't even take the car, right? Anyway, it's a basic cliche, but it seems like we have to keep repeating these things, right? The incident happened in the United States. I'm comparing this to Brazil. There are so many things we need. Sometimes it feels like we have to point out the obvious, like needing a law for child seats in cars. If you crash, the kid could go flying. You need a law to tell you that you have to use it, that it's safer, a bunch of things like that. It's like, man, it seems like you have to be handheld and told, hey, you can do this, you can't do that. That's how it is. Share your thoughts, Therapist Space. Let's chat. Thanks for your company. A kiss from the redhead. See you next episode.